how blessed we are to work in a Catholic community in Dallas. It's a big city, but it's a small city, and we're a small city within a city. And it's been very heartwarming to see so many schools and events thrive in the last 15 years or so. You hear a lot about, well, the market is saturated, and yet every event that gets added seems to find a way to fill the capacity and through your hard work. So I think it's a great shared mission we have. So in Jesuit style, I'm going to stay at the low end of my time allotment. But I thought, a lot of you know Jesuit. I'm happy to take Jesuit-related questions, maybe in the Q&A if you have them, but I thought just the thing that strikes me about what we do is that I would ask for a show of hands, and I bet it's very small, how many of you went to school to do what you're doing? How many of us went to college to write? It's becoming more common, but we came to this through other outlets. I was an intramural sports director at SMU when I started, and all of you have your own story. I went into the for-profit world to work for Club Corp, and eventually a mission spirit leads you back. But it's just, we get here different ways. And you know, Mr. Sladik back there, he had to go to a lot of law school to do what he does so well, and those of you who are attorneys or doctors, not so much what we do. Anybody can do it. Really, anybody can do it. But there are a few basics that separate those that do it well and others that might struggle. I thought I'd just touch on those quickly. First of all, I'd encourage everyone to get the term nonprofit out of your minds completely. It's a holdback. The world treats nonprofits differently, unfairly. We work on the for-profit side to serve a nonprofit. And when you, so I'm not a teacher, I'm not a student. Those are the people John and I serve. So we don't need to have a teacher or student's mentality. We need to have a business person's mentality to try to maximize resources to help that mission. And I think just to get that nonprofit term out altogether is a great start. Secondly, a consultant by the name of Jerry Smith ingrained something in us in a campaign we had that launched in 2006. It's much like you control your attitude daily. You can influence the person next to you's attitude, but you can't control it. We control our activity levels. You can't control what a donor is going to give. You can influence it. But our activity levels will dictate success. He or she who does more each day and does more productively wins. And of course, your talent level and all everything else comes into play, but it's that expression, hard work beats talent when talent's not working hard. Your activity level drives success. Steve Newhoff, who some of you know, he's a Class 84 grad Jesuit. I worked with him early on. He was really helpful to me. And I said, Steve, I'm just not getting a response. He said, what are you doing? I said, well, come here, look at this email. He said, you're emailing people. He just said, pick up the phone, dude. You know, Steve, that's how Steve talks. He said, pick up the phone. And then he came and looked at the email. He said, but if you are going to send an email, shorten it by about 90%. The moment someone says, hi, I hope you're doing well, it's like, okay, what do you want? No, just get to the point. Because you want people to see the end of your email in the screen they open the email in. So Steve was very helpful there. And just pick up the phone is a term that we use a lot. Getting out of the office, I think we all know that, but it's a challenge. The more we're in the office, the less we're doing for the mission. We have to get out of the office to be successful. Probably a lot of people here maybe in one or two person shops potentially, which is wildly challenging. What I tend to see a lot, you know, is the gravitation to events and grant writing. And I think those things are very important. They're necessary to build community, but they're not very cost effective. And when they get to take the lead and major gift fundraising or annual appeals suffer or are non-existent because we're too busy running this event, we're trying to pull off this gala or this golf tournament or this dinner. it really where it's one-on-one relationship fundraising that it yields. It's the lowest cost to the highest revenue back to the profit side of being a nonprofit. I'm still amazed by how many people are in this, and I will call it business for a long time. It's a heartwarming business who are not comfortable asking. I'd strongly encourage practice to get comfortable asking, and part of that is to desensitize yourself about just the dollars and cents themselves and get a good relational perspective. It's not our job, if the prospective donor is engaged with you and seems a bit uncomfortable, then congratulations, you've done your job. They'll let you know if you've made them too uncomfortable, but I suspect we wouldn't do that. But it's getting comfortable asking and asking often. But obviously, with training comes knowing when to ask. And then lastly, a big tip of the cap to my colleague, John Sabine, who's in the room, who I think is better than anyone I've ever met at expressing gratitude. You can't say thank you often enough. And it's sometimes we're so busy trying to move on to the next gift that we don't express that much. So those would be the 6 things I jotted down, and they're just kind of from what Bill said, the 101 piece. And for a lot of you, you're probably, BJ, we got all that. But that's why I think if people practice those 6 things, it really doesn't matter what line of work you have, what your educational degree is in. You practice those 6 things, and I think your success rates will be high. That's it. I hope I stayed on it.
You bet. All right. Well, first of all, I just also want to add my thanks to the Catholic Foundation. As I was sharing with Bill earlier, I had spent my career in higher ed and more recently with Europe. Definitely we'll circle back to that because I certainly have an interesting ask for you all that doesn't have to do with development. But for me, my Catholic faith is so deeply intertwined with my professional journey in development. I'm a revert, as they call us sometimes. Some of you know me less as the executive director of Europe and more as the wife of a diaconate candidate in the class of 2020 who we came back to our faith around the time that I made the career change into development. And really having read a book that some of you may know by Henry Nouwen on fundraising as ministry. That being a huge part of recognizing what the work really is that we are so blessed to do. And so I just have so precious few opportunities to share how those things intertwine and how that undergirds kind of the success that I've been blessed to experience in my career and the folks that I've been able to learn from. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity. So as and we'll talk about, I'm sure, campaigns. I'm looking over at Kevin, who, when I think of the term momentum in a campaign, mic drop on Kevin Fitzpatrick in that space. I've been blessed to work on several billion-dollar campaigns in my work. And then now in 2016, joined Year Up to help launch and now lead our first site in Texas. And just quickly, I just wanted to share a little bit about that organization to add to what Bill said earlier. So fundamentally what Year Up is committed to and what attracted me to the organization is a fundamental understanding of the dignity of work and the importance of being able to envision and have support in exploring opportunities. So we serve 18 through 24-year-olds, young adults who lack opportunities, and we connect them to companies that really need their talent. And so for me, there's a real joy in being able to see a young person like our Cristo Rey brothers and sisters at that next age where a lot of folks have basically said it's too late. At this point, it's remedial, right? There's not an opportunity. And yet there are so many companies, AT&T, Bank of America, JP Morgan, Chase, who are looking to be able to recruit middle skill, entry-level talent, diversify their talent pipelines. And what's so exciting about it is that they see the potential in these young people, and folks are moving from minimum wage jobs into 40, good middle class jobs, and being able to pursue hard work. So I raise it, interestingly, our challenge is not development. It is not internships for these young folks. It is students. So I'm hoping at the end of this period to be able to talk to some of my colleagues working and serving young folks, especially young women, that might be interested in learning more about Europe, so that we can get those folks into that pipeline. So when I thought about the panel today, so over the course of my career, I've pretty much landed, and I'm one of those people that finds the letter and kind of makes the, it's the 3 C's for me is what has been fundamental to development success. And so for me, they're curiosity, co-creation, and community. And especially community, building a community of shared purpose. And so it's not lost on me that all of these align with the teachings of our faith. So the first one, curiosity, is really around major gift work and prospecting. When I started in this career, one of my mentors shared with me that, charisma is overrated in fundraising. I think a lot of folks, I remember going to a conference early on, and they separated the extroverts, they did a Myers-Briggs, extroverts and the introverts. And the extroverts said, how could you ever be in this field? To the introverts. And the introverts said, how do you ever listen enough to help somebody meet their goals? And so I think that's really interesting because, again, as I mentioned earlier, fundraising is ministry, is really about listening and being in a relationship with others. And some of the most incredible mentors I've worked with, the relationships that I've been able to build. I'll go back to my time starting out at UT as a development associate. I started at the bottom rung and I was organizing the files. And we had a process of, which I think is a very smart one, of having our donors sign bequest intention letters. And so they would just share that they wanted to leave us in their estate. And as I went through these files and read these, to me, each one of those was a story. And it was, why did this person choose to do that? And even though my job was just to organize the files, I started asking, well, could I go and meet with these folks? I'd like to learn. I'm curious as to what led them to leave UT and their plans. And in that, I thought it was so interesting to be able to just that basic stewardship, right, of the relationship, of building and understanding what are those motivating desires and passions. What is that person, what I now recognize is what is their mission in life and why did they want to leave those resources back to the institution. And then I still remember one quiet teacher who we just started to become friends and started sharing stories. She met my husband, we took her to dinner, and then ultimately somebody who everybody just assumed was going to leave this really modest gift to us decided to accelerate that gift and made a $3 million investment in the university. And it was just such a learning for me around always staying curious and listening first and foremost. I know we all say that, but it's really hard to do when we have pressing needs and projects. But I really want to encourage when you focus on that major gift work, how important that is to being able to be present to the individuals we work with. The second one, co-creation. So I don't know how many of you have ever heard of Jim Langley. He has a company called Langley Innovations. He's a former vice president of Georgetown. And I wanted to ask the same question, almost the same question, but I'm sure there's very few of us that thought that we were, well, let me ask this. How many of you have been asked, how do you raise money for a living? Quick show of hands. For me, that's one of those things that we also have to erase, right? We don't raise money. We, again, both Jim and going back to right now, the whole idea that we facilitate mission, that we are here to hear those stories of where people, what are their motivating passions, and connect them to the opportunities that we have in our organizations. And now I say that's really easy. Universities are a lot bigger than many small nonprofits. But I still think that the idea of being able to, I'm going to use this around board engagement. In working with our boards, our tendency sometimes is to see what can they do for us. And I really want to encourage, and I have seen a lot of success in engaging my board very early in the co-creation of the case for support. of what are those passions that are going to engage others and help them to be able to build a strong case for support that then they have that ownership of, that they are really engaged and involved in. And again, a pretty helpful example for me was, I actually may disagree about the ask piece. In university fundraising, I actually pride myself that very rarely have I been the one to lead the $1 million gift conversation. It is usually a very close concert with a volunteer. Because so many of those relationships are so deep and so much more engaging to have that volunteer be able to solicit that gift. And so the process of engaging a volunteer to the point where they're not going off by themselves, you're going together, but that you are working to, especially at the lead gift level, have them speak to why they invested and to bring others along, has enabled me in many instances. I was thinking, over $150 million that we've been blessed to raise. It's been working to engage and prep and bring volunteers into that case, so much so that they speak with that level of passion around why this will have impact on our organization. So co-creation is something I really would encourage. I'll give you an example. So in 2009, as you know, we had the huge hit, the arts community. I was raising money for the arts in this city. Many organizations were closing. And we had an initiative, a research initiative to analyze the downturn in the arts funding and in arts patronage at the university. And through the process of reaching out to those who really cared about that topic, who'd been invested in the arts community, we were able to engage 12 new volunteers who had no connection to SMU. One was a Stanford grad. And she led the process and became so engaged that we ultimately ended up raising $5 million in seed money from a very brand new and diverse prospect pool because of the level of time that we took to engage them in building the case. And then last but not least for me, the last C is community. So I know we talk a lot about that, but this whole idea of building, when we talk about campaigns, of building that sense of engagement. So again, I can't say enough, Kevin, watching you at the first Heroic Media Luncheon that I attended and how you helped everyone see themselves in the campaign, in this incredibly important mission of Heroic Media. That to me is kind of like the mic drop on campaign building. And for me, when, again, in that same downturn, I worked in a campus where we had a number of different departments, all speaking with different voices to our alumni. Our alumni were disengaged, as many of you know. SMU had been the recipient of the death penalty. Alumni from that kind of time period had disconnected from the university. And so what we did was we recognized, how can we create a unifying message that could bring folks from all walks of life, the individual annual gift donor all the way up to our lead endowment donors, into a scholarship campaign and connect them little by little and let them see, back to this idea of stewardship, let them see the impact of this program wherever level they were able to invest in. We took I, like you, totally agree, BJ. Events can be such a challenge for an organization to be able to effectively execute and fundraise with. And so we brought that up underneath the umbrella of fundraising for this scholarship program. And so not only did that highlight that event, highlight those individual donors, but also our endowment donors, and then also the way that individuals could invest in it. As a result, we were able to build very, very quickly an endowment over a period of 5 years of $10 million, because we were just able to bring everyone in, and then ultimately also bring folks in at a level that later they were able to invest at an endowment level after they felt a little more secure financially. So again, those three are kind of the three elements of the success that I've been blessed to experience in fundraising, kind of fundamental principles that I wanted to share with you this morning.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Kevin Fitzpatrick, and I'll start off, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but Bill wanted me to talk about kind of how I got to Heroic Media. I was a junior at the University of Dallas, had no idea what I was going to do when I graduated, and wound up being invited to Heroic Media's first annual Prayer Breakfast for Life. I fell in love with the mission. I also saw Mike Murray up on stage who had opened the Dallas office of Heroic Media in 2010, and I thought to myself, I think I can do what he's doing. So I wound up calling him up, started interning, that led to a part-time job, and then I started full-time the day after I graduated in May of 2015. So when I met Mike that first time, that'll be 6 years ago in November. And just seeing how, it's like, without being at that event, I wouldn't be here, I wouldn't have known about this whole world. And then also, again, back to Mike Murray and the Catholic Foundation, starting this event, I met Jamie Apt here a couple of years ago, and that started a conversation, and he's now one of our development officers. So definitely things like this are amazing. The Catholic Foundation has done a great job of bringing people together, so thank you for that. And again, what I'm going to talk about today is also major gifts, because it is the fastest, most effective, and most repeatable way of raising the money that our missions need to do to accomplish our goals. And kind of under that, I'll start off with a consultant once asked me a question, Kevin, what do you think your biggest enemy is to your success? And I can't remember what I said, but I do remember what he said, which was very bluntly wrong. Your biggest enemy is the status quo. He told me, Kevin, in the nonprofit world, generally speaking, especially like small organizations like us, the status quo is pathetically low. And I agree with him. It is rare that we're challenged to great levels of excellence. I think about in the for-profit world, people in sales that are performing at the highest levels, people that are making $500,000 or over $1 million a year, they're not just showing up and thinking, what am I going to do today? They're training every single day on how to be the best in the world. When they're driving to work, they're listening to audiobooks, they're listening to podcasts, they're role-playing every day with their team to become the best in the world, to know how to schedule meetings effectively, to know how to close deals. And so if they're doing that, like BJ said, the nonprofit term has become so bad. I mean, who wants to, it's like, let's wake up today to not make a profit. That's a Tom Sykes line, that's not mine. But it's true. We need to have that same desire for excellence that the for-profit world has. And there's certainly differences between sales and fundraising, but knowing things like how to handle objections on the phone, how to maximize our time in the office when we're making calls, how to schedule visits effectively. If we need to know how to do those things, if we call somebody to schedule a visit and we get an objection like, now's not a good time, I'm busy, or I already know what you do, and we don't know how to respond to that, and we simply say, oh, well, thanks for your time, buddy, and never talk to them again, we cannot let that happen. I think about this wasn't skill at the time, but it was luck, but one of the most meaningful relationships of my career, the first time I called this guy, the first thing out of his mouth that he told me was, Kevin, I will never give a penny to Heroic Media. And that, I lucked into getting to know that guy, but knowing how to respond to things like that is key to our success. Kind of on that same line, I'll talk about, and I might ruffle some feathers this morning, but that's kind of my goal. I'm going to talk about excuses now. I've noticed a lot, I find myself sometimes less and less as the years go on, but especially when I started, and I see it a lot with people I talk to, just making excuses as to why we can't raise the money that we need. And there's a difference between recognizing an obstacle, which is something that, hey, I understand this is a challenge, but we can overcome it, versus an excuse, which is we just use an excuse to make ourselves feel comfortable with mediocrity or failure. So things like, we were chatting about this earlier, oh, there's only so many people in the Catholic community, there's not enough money out there. I'm too old, I'm too young, there's my board is crazy, my boss is crazy. Like all these things are, If you are working for that organization, you better believe you are called by God to advance this mission or leave. And if you believe this is worth asking someone for a significant gift, then don't worry about all those little details. Just go ahead, and we have to make this happen. Because what I tell myself every day is, stop making excuses and start making phone calls. Kind of what BJ was talking about. Because, what I know is the women and children that we serve at Heroic Media, they don't care about my excuses. Those little babies, they just want to live. And so we need to stop making excuses, and we need to just, have that level of excellence that those in the for-profit world constantly are seeking. Kind of the last thing I'll end on is I've been blessed by having one of the greatest mentors on major gift fundraising in the country, this guy. Right here, Mike Perkins. He was on our board for 3 years before he became our president and CEO. And I think the most meaningful thing Mike ever taught me is that, not only through words but in action, is that we do what we do to serve the benefactor. We don't simply raise money for our organizations. And the reason this is so key is that before I understood that philosophy, everything, when I thought my job is to raise money, if I go and meet with someone and they wind up not giving a gift, or they tell me something through conversation that would make it inappropriate to ask them for a gift at that time, if I leave and I don't have a commitment, then I fail. But if our goal is to serve the benefactor, whether or not they make an enormous commitment that's going to change the trajectory of our organization, or they wind up telling us something like, hey Kevin, you know what, I just lost my job. I can't give anything. In fact, I need your help with this. Whether or not that happens, the question we need to ask ourselves when we leave that visit is, did I serve them well? That's our measure of success. And so with that, I'd say, seek to serve God primarily, seek to serve the benefactor, and then train and act like the lives and souls of those our organizations serve depend on it, and the money will come.